did you seek counseling? Did you receive any counseling for your abuse, and did it help you?
At one point in time, I did go to counseling for the abuse, just to I wanted to speak with someone freely and be able to hear myself. Mm-hmm. Sometimes we don't recognize what we're actually going through until we hear ourselves speaking of it. Mm-hmm. And so once I started opening up about it, I started realizing that in speaking about it, I was freeing myself to a certain point. And so the counseling did help me when I did go. It wasn't for an extensive period of time because I'm a believer and I have an extensive belief in God. And, I had to really dig deep within myself to learn to understand me and who I was at that point, because I lost myself after, living through the violence and after being molested and then getting into relationships myself where I put myself in a situation to be abused. So I didn't become an abuser, but I put myself back into a situation because this was my comfort zone. This is what I was used to seeing.
Right.
And as Ms. Carroll spoke about, I had a skewed vision of what love was. This is all I grew up knowing.
Right.
So people I trusted doing things that weren't necessarily right, but as a child, nobody was telling me that these things weren't right. I just felt that. I had that innate feeling that something wasn't right, until I got older. So, yeah, that's...
Thank you both for sharing your story. Thank you for sharing. I'm so glad that you both are voices for survivors. It's just been amazing show. I do have one more question for the both of you. So we are in a health crisis right now with the coronavirus, and we're talking about schools are closing and people are teleworking. But one population that we are not looking at is people that are being abused in their homes, either through child molestation or survivors that's just in there. They don't have an outlet. So what would you tell our listeners? Someone is listening right now. What would you tell them about, just really briefly, what would you tell them about how to survive, and what words of hope or inspiration can you give them through this time? And since I'm looking at you, I'll let you go.
Well, first of all, this is a scary pandemic at this time, and we know that the best way to stay clear is to, keep our distance, good hand washing, and things like that. So prayerfully, even in these situations, these young ladies or men are in a situation to where they're able to practice put good hygienic things into practice. And get the supplies that they need in order to remain safe. I know a lot of times with me, I was unable to leave the house as often. Now that in this case would be of benefit in some instances, but just trying to keep the supplies that you need, stay mentally in a place where you're not being overcome and governed by fear, and staying kind of in that fight or flight mode. Myself being a nurse and being in a nursing home facility where this coronavirus is growing rapidly, and that's the majority of the people that it is harming is our elderly population. So that's another thing with the benefit of being younger and having a better immune system. So I would just say stay in a mental place to where as though you are not staying in a mode of fear concerning it, because you already have enough on your plate with dealing with trying to survive in the household, mentally dealing with